I'm Tomas Björkman. I'm a serial entrepreneur. I've started about 20 companies in IT, property, and in finance. About 10 years ago, I started the foundation, Ekskäret Foundation, the Oak Island Foundation, and I've also written a few books. And my short talk today is going to be based on my book, The World We Create, Världen vi skapar in Swedish. And it's all about the fact that we actually have a much more power to create this world than we usually think about. And that we throughout history has constantly been recreating and creating this world in a very unconscious way, but it's a way that we are just now waking up to. Just want to show you a picture of our wonderful island, Ekskäret. Our foundation has a base out in the island in the archipelago, but also a base in central Stockholm with Ekskäret Klustret, a co-working space where we're trying to gather companies and organizations that all want to be part of co-creating what we sometimes call a more conscious society. The base of the foundation is really in exploring the relationship between our personal inner development and societal change. And this is something that, of course, always have been important, but I think that this is becoming more and more important to look at this, and especially the role our inner development, our consciousness, plays in this. In my book, I take the starting point, the technological development, and we've been talking all the day today about this rapid technological development that we are in. My point in the book is that we are moving from a world of scarcity, that we've been living in for more than 200,000 years as humans, and that our mind, our brain was really developed for that world. And now we are probably moving into a world of abundance, which should be good news for everyone if we can manage to distribute this abundance. And if we are moving into a world where we might not even have to work, we need to be able to find that new world meaningful and find purpose without work. So that is one aspect, moving from scarcity to abundance. The other aspect is that throughout history, from Stone Age up until today, we have more or less been living in a constant environment, at least during generations. Major technological changes has happened between generations. And now we are living already in a world with constant change. The world is changing rapidly, even within our lifetime. Within my lifetime, at least, I've seen 2 or 3 complete different technological and social environments. So, the challenge is that our mind, our brain was developed in a world of scarcity and constant environment, and now we're living in a world of abundance and constant change. And it is essentially the same brain. It's essentially the same hardware that we got. So how are we then able to live in such a completely different world from our evolutionary environment? And the answer there is, of course, that we do not only have our brain, we also have our mind and our society. And one way of putting this could be that the brain is our hardware, that is our computer, whereas our mind is our software. And this software is to a very large extent stored in society. I really zoom out in this book and look at the 13.8 billion years of evolution. And of course, a lot of things has happened in this evolution. Perhaps the most important step during those 13.8 billion years might be the point where life for the first time became conscious and self-conscious. But this little part, the biological part of the evolution, is only a small part. If you take a really large systems perspective, the biological evolution is just a tiny little piece in the middle. First, we had the physical evolution, all the way from Big Bang through particle evolution, atoms, molecules. And then life kicked in, evolution put in a higher gear, through our becoming conscious, developing language, a cultural evolution kicked in, speeding up evolution even more. Some are talking about genes in the biological evolution and memes in the cultural evolution. And complexity has all through this time been on a steady rise, but right now complexity is more or less exploding. So I argue that we handle this complexity and our changing environment by downloading new programs, new software updates. And we have been having these updates ever since the start of humanity. The software that this picture illustrates, it's more complex than the previous ones. As society developed, we got more and more refined softwares, more and more intellectual innovations to be able to handle our world. Until eventually, today, we are in a really complex social environment and operating a very complex operating system. But the important insight is that this operating system that we are operating today is fundamentally not different from the way our very primitive Stone Age operating systems were operating. And it's not easy for us to see our own operating system, to really step outside the box and try to look at the lens through which we see and operate in our world is very, very difficult. I know that one of the speakers later today will talk about a giant experiment that is going on every year about upgrading our software. It is an experiment where up to 70,000 people try to move outside of our current operating system, move into the desert, try to download a new operating system, and for a week operate within that new system. And this experiment is, of course, called Burning Man. Sometimes throughout history, we are not just updating our operating system a little bit, but we are downloading a completely new operating system. It's like going from Microsoft DOS to Microsoft Windows. In those cases, we are not just changing the systems within society, not only changing the system, but we are changing the way we view ourselves, our society, and our world. And those large shifts we could even then call a paradigm shift. And there are many models to describe these paradigm shifts, and I will not go into any details. I will just say that last time we had such a major update in our world was during the Enlightenment. Then the old paradigm was the medieval way of seeing the world. It was a lens consisting of religion, of superstition, family tradition, that perhaps had its peak some 500 years ago from now. Then suddenly, through technological developments, many different things, but not the least the printing press and other communication ways, this paradigm started to lose power. And we saw a period that was quite disruptive. It was a period of the French Revolution, of the Napoleonic Wars, and it went on for almost 100 years. But out of this chaos, a new emerging paradigm was born, and that was the paradigm of what we today call modernity. Here, our dogmatic religious way of seeing the world was replaced with rational, scientific way of looking on ourselves. And this operating system has, of course, been tremendously successful for us. This is what has given us all new modern medicine. It's given us internet. It's given us democracy. It's given us essentially everything we have today. It's been so successful, this paradigm, that one could almost say that it has been too successful. Many of the problems we see today, if not most of them, are actually problems that we have created ourselves. And the old paradigm, the Enlightenment paradigm, I argue, is a very big cause of these problems. We can speak about the environment, we can speak about world poverty, terrorism. Today, more people die from eating too much than eating too little. Psychological ill health, crashing markets, political system in turmoil. And a lot of people feel insecure and are frightened. I think that what we are seeing in all of these things are not a multitude of crises. I think this is one crisis. I think it's a meta-crisis. And I think it is our paradigm that is starting to lose its power because of technological development. Again, we need to shift paradigm. And this time, the old paradigm is modernity. That had its peak perhaps here in Scandinavia during the 60s and 70s, and are right now starting to lose power. So then the question, of course, becomes, what is the emerging paradigm? What is it that wants to be born now again? And of course, we don't know. We are right in the beginning of this. But there are a lot of people thinking about this. A lot of philosophers, a lot of sociologists, a lot of business people are thinking about this. And of course, just thinking from an entrepreneurial perspective, if we want to stay in business and develop new businesses, trying to have some sort of idea of what this new paradigm might look like could, of course, be very, very valuable. And as I said, I don't know. I paint a picture in my book about possible components of this paradigm, and I will not have time to go into those now. I will just say that I think that this new paradigm has to do a lot with our inner world and with our consciousness. If the Industrial Revolution was based on an acceptance of our limited knowledge of our outer world, and it was through that acceptance and our curiosity about the outer world that we discovered new continents and were able to put a man on the moon. Now I think that the revolution of our time is also about acceptance, this time about accepting the fact that we have very limited knowledge about our inner world. I think that acceptance of our limited knowledge of our inner world and the discoveries that will come from that will be the major step forward for humanity in our century. So to move from the old paradigm into the new paradigm, we first have to surrender. We have to surrender to the fact that we are not fully developed. that we are on a constantly developing path, both as a society and as individuals. And when we have accepted that, being in touch with ourselves will be an invitation, both to raise our awareness, to grow, and hopefully to become more human. Thank you very much.